And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Thank you so much for helping us grow. We just hit 1,780 subscribers thanks to people like you. We grow every day. Please like and share our videos. It really means a lot, and it helps us to see how our community is growing. Also, remember you can join the chat feature and ask questions of our guests and make comments. We love to see the comments and as they're going, and it just makes the conversation more rich. You can find our past 250 episodes on my website at www.jasontramm.net. Again, that's www.jasontramm with two M's.net. We have a great guest today. We have, all the way from London, we have Giannis Giannopoulos, who is a concert pianist and conductor and a music educator. And we're delighted he can join us. He's Greek-born, and he was trained in London, and we're going to learn all about his work today. So welcome, Giannis.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. We met a couple of weeks ago on an interview with a wonderful soprano, and I said, this guy is really interesting, and I'm so glad you can join us here in Music Matters.
Likewise.
Did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
I did, yes. Actually, I think I'm one of the lucky ones. I think it's quite sheer luck to be able to know what you want to do. And I still got some notes as a kid, drawings of me drawing myself as a pianist and wishing to be a conductor. So it was actually very, very...
Wow.
I was 5-6 years old.
The conducting bug early. Do you come from a musical family?
In a way, yes. My grandmother was a piano teacher, so she was the one who got me going, and she taught the whole family, the whole neighborhood, or the whole city, all over the place. She was a really good teacher, very, very patient, and I learned a lot from her. I was one of her last students and the only one from the family that became a professional musician. So, yeah, I think she was very pleased when she saw me move on.
I'm sure she was very proud to be that person who fostered that growth and started the journey for you.
Exactly. Yes.
And now you have that function. You teach a lot of people, so you get to do your professional work, but also encourage the next generation as well.
I find that the most inspiring, and it has helped a lot in my professional work as well, because in a way, I started off teaching, I teach the piano mostly. This is how I started. But then when you start to be more specific and you're asking more things from your students, then you ask the same questions to yourself when you practice or when you perform. So you become a teacher of yourself. So I think that is one of the things that I've learned while teaching, and it has helped a lot.
So what was the atmosphere like growing up in Greece and surrounded by music? And tell me about your development and then your conservatory years.
It was really nice. I felt from the moment I entered the Athens Conservatory, which, I mean, most of the students there believe it's the best in the country, and I won't say that it isn't. We're very proud being in that community, and it was really nice because it felt like my second school, my second home, and I went all the way up until my diploma, and I was there doing all the courses. It was kind of like a university towards the last years, and after that I came to London, and this is a different topic, but in Greece, music, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of potential. We always have to aim higher, of course, but the colleagues you get, the teachers we had are really great musicians, and I'm very proud of the education I got from there.
So I've had quite a few Greek artists on the show, some opera singers, some instrumental artists, and I find that a lot of the artists go get their masters in another country. Is that common?
It is very common. I think that the way that the education is structured would possibly need some additions, and so that they can keep the students for the postgrad or the master's degrees. but the foundation is quite is very high standards, and that's why I think that it's not that hard for us to go abroad and broaden, our knowledge. Of course, Greece is Greece, but when you travel, when you go to London, and when I came to the Royal Academy of Music, the things were way different. There was great antagonism, but at the same time, this kind of drives you forward, and I needed that at that age.
So you liked it so much you decided to stay and raise your family there as well.
I did. I actually went back to Greece after my studies. It was the military service that brought me back to Greece, because we have that in our lives. But then I was lucky enough to start teaching at the Conservatory in Athens, which was a great honor for me. I loved that place, and suddenly I get to work there. And I was 26, 27, which was a really young age for me to be working at my dream job. But yes, as you said, London was always a place that I wanted to live. So then I had my family, and then we decided, let's go back to London, and that's where we are.
So what was it like coming from your country of Greece and coming to London and the big city, and what were some of the adjustments you had to make when you got there? And tell us about some of the great experiences.
I think the different cultures that you meet, the different artists that you meet, it opens your horizon. It opens your eyes. You see so many different people that work on the same genre, or the same. We all do this classical music called, but we're from different places, and we get to show something different in the same music, and I think that was really, really inspiring.
Now you came as a concert pianist. Did the conducting happen at the same time? Was it something that came after? How did conducting fit within your studies?
The conducting was always a dream. As I told you, I was hoping to become a conductor since I was a kid. But I was busy with my piano, with performance, and with competitions and all of that. So I always postponed it, because I thought that it would need full dedication, which apparently did need. So when I went back to Greece, I was really lucky to, when I was teaching at the Conservatoire, then the conducting teacher there, Maestro Kardinos, he is a fine conductor and a really good teacher. And I got the opportunity to get in his class, and that's how I started. And by working and studying at the same time, it was kind of the opportunity that I wanted, that I needed in order to start. So I had like a parallel life with doing both, which I don't think that I will kind of stop. I think that it never stops. You have multiple layers in your life, and you have to do all sort of things.
We were talking about that on the pre-show. We were just chatting about that. How I'm also an educator. I teach at a university, but I do lots of different types of things between opera and symphonic and teaching and choral music, and I just find I thrive on that diversity.
It's so useful. It's so nice, because you get from everything, and then you can apply it in all sort of work that you do. I feel that the opera experiences I've had, I always put it into my teaching. I always put it into my playing, into the solo, into it's. I have become an opera lover, whilst I was completely against opera until 10 years ago. So this conducting course through my teacher kind of attracted all my full attention, and now I'm using this in my life and in my work. So yes, you're using stuff from all over into your profession in any part of it.
Do you have a singing background?
No, and it was one of the things that I found that was challenging, because I didn't know about technique. I didn't know about, but I started working as a rep as a repetitor in a very good, in a tenors Adonis Coroneos in the Conservatoire, and it helped me very, very, very much.
Being around that and learning the repertoire and the sense of style and watching people teach, yeah, that's the way to learn, right? That's the traditional pathway for a lot of the most famous conductors, is that kind of German house where you start as repetiteur and then assistant conductor and working your way up to the conductor. Absolutely.
It is, and it was my teacher, the conductor's conducting teacher, the approach that you have to go through that, especially because you're a good pianist. You have to take advantage of that and combine. And most of my works, especially at the beginning of my career in conducting, was conducting an opera from the piano, or combining those two skills. And I feel very privileged to have done that.
What are some of your favorite opera repertoire to conduct?
It has to be Mozart. I'm a very a huge fan of Mozart in any work, as even piano solo, which is not the what people prefer. But I always find what I said earlier about the opera within his work in any part of his repertoire. But then naturally, I fell in love with Italian as well, with Verdi and Puccini. I think this is how it evolved, and the opera evolved in that way. And I think my love in opera followed the same path.
And you have a similar. So Mozart's also some of your favorite piano writing as well.
Maybe not. Maybe not. The concerti are. I love all of them, are gems. That there's always something in any of his works. Like, it might be just 8 bars of pure genius that he puts. It has a signature. I feel that in the most ordinary work that he has written, there's something that is there to remind us of who he actually was.
One of the greats, yeah. I mean, when you think about how early he was writing like fully formed masterworks, it just I tell my students, I'm like, however good you are entering conservatory, remember that Mozart was writing, the symphonies at 12, and the operas at 12, and I always say that and Schubert wrote Die Erlkönig when he was 17.
Yes.
And Mendelssohn wrote Overture to a Midsummer Night's Dream at 17.
I feel very old now.
Good reality check for us all. Well, you're younger than I am. I'm 47, so when you get there. But luckily, I'm around young people all the time, so it keeps me young.
It helps, yes. That's very true. That's very true.
So what's some of your favorite concerto rep that you enjoy?
I always enjoy playing the Liszt concertos because it has felt very natural in some weird reason. My technique fitted really well with his challenges and what he's been asking in those crazy concertos. So I found them easier than many others that are possibly. I mean, I wouldn't dare treat a Beethoven concerto in the way that I treat the Liszt ones. So yes, Liszt concertos have been my favorite. I love the Rachmaninoff, but I think that for now, at the moment, that I'm split into those different paths in my life. It would need complete dedication and I wouldn't afford mentally to go that way. But in the past, they were very favorites of mine as a young pianist.
I love how, as a conductor, all of your formative experiences kind of they manifest, and that's what what makes one person interesting in one way and in some certain repertoire. Has there a certain repertoire in your conducting that you've enjoyed more than other that's kind of stood out for you?
It has to be. It has in conducting in symphonic music. I think it has to be Beethoven. It has to be. It's the foundation, and I find that despite I think it might be treason to Mozart what I'm saying, but still I can dare say that it's where you can build your technique, where you can build your ideas, and based on that you can work on anything else after that.
I find Mozart so hard to make it really good. I mean, it may not be the most challenging technically because Beethoven and on would add layers of technical, challenges to everyone, and the instruments were more developed and over time. But nothing like you hear a great performance of a Mozart symphony. It's a work of art. It's like a gem.
It is. It is, and it's all those not hidden but not projected things that you can find in the score that are worth offering in abundance, like all those middle lines, those in the instrumentation that is very, very. It seems quite classical, but at the same time, you can see that he's got more. It's between the lines that you could read.
I always think like, what would someone like Mozart or Beethoven think about the modern grand piano? It's such a different thing. I mean, if you think Mozart was raised on the harpsichord, his technique is basically a harpsichord technique. His pianofortes were much lighter instruments. They didn't have all the weight. They didn't have all the notes even. So it's such a I love I share with my undergraduates that the piano, just like everything else in society, changes over time. And it's completely different. His touch would have been different. His sensibilities would have been different. There wasn't as much of his personal, like Beethoven opened the door for the Romantics with his narrative storytelling in his music, and Mozart didn't think that way.
Yes, and it's they've got those questions they ask often. Which person would you like to meet out of all the people you admire? If I could kind of play with time, I would really want to bring Mozart at our era and listen to his opinion about all the things that followed, because I imagine that it would be shocking and inspiring for him to get more of the instrument. And it's not just the piano. Of course, the piano is an example, but you can see all of the brass, how they evolved, how they changed, and how they were used later on. You can imagine him with the Requiem and using the brass of nowadays, how he would have changed.
I mean, the Requiem was so great and so interesting how they worked, how they used the lack of what the brass could do to their effect. Beethoven was the genius. He'd use the orchestration so challengingly, and he'd make the natural instruments work to his advantage. They were so brilliant at that.
Of course.
And if they had a chromatic brass section, I tell everyone, Mozart, they didn't have clarinets in the orchestra until about 1780. That was like when he was at the end of his life, last 10 years of his life. So, I mean, we had just finalized the woodwind quartet. So if he had the brass and the increased percussion, who knows what Mozart would have done.
Yeah, it's a shame at the same time, but if you think about it, after all those years, it might have been the reason that these things evolved, because those composers kind of moved music forward, and that's where the necessity came, because without them we probably would not need to evolve that quickly. So they sped up, the whole thing went faster because of their writing and their needs to move things ahead.
I love that. And I wonder, we wonder what would Beethoven have done, what would Mozart have done. They were just such different people too. And I wonder, I think of someone like Brahms, who had everything. If he wanted to write for 20 timpani players, he probably could have, but he chose to only write with one timpani player. And on the fourth symphony has a triangle. I mean, he did not want the expanded. He wanted just the room. Not a huge orchestra, kind of working within the forms. Some composers don't want to go farther than that.
No.
But I'm working on Brahms 3. I have a rehearsal on Thursday and a performance in early March. And I'm like, boy, he doesn't need all the extra instruments. He gets everything he wants out of this incredible use of craftsmanship and orchestration and just using the instruments to their full capability.
When you know what you're doing, I think you know what you're using. You don't want to go excessively. Not that at the same time, it's not an innuendo for Mahler, for instance, that he overdid it, but still, when it's a different approach, and experiments are needed. So even that, the fact that some composers went really beyond limits, and it was needed again, and we understood why this was just a one-off, and it was not what we needed as listeners. So you have to appreciate what we you have every time. And yes, Brahms was a perfect example of using the right amount of what he needed.
Well, his contemporaries would argue that he was was too academic and this and that. But even Schoenberg, I love Schoenberg's argument. He thought that Brahms was quite a visionary and quite progressive. It was interesting coming from Schoenberg, actually.
Yes, but still, you would imagine that someone who is progressive would identify the one who is really progressive as well. So he knew in what ways Brahms was progressive and how he moved music forward.
We always respect those kind of visionary voices. So COVID kind of halted the progress of all of us in the music field. I'm sure you were really getting things moving and doing some exciting projects. How did that affect your musical life? And we're going to dig into that chapter. So tell us about that.
Yes, it's both the practical, but also the mental uh, problems that it caused. So it's obviously when you're teaching, when you're working, when you have concerts and they're cancelled, and you have projects, you have festivals, and they're all off. It does affect you, but I think that it probably affected me more in the mental way that I suddenly found that I needed a break, which was great for a couple of weeks, maybe month. But after that, you realize that that was not a short break. That was something you needed to adapt to. You needed to adjust. And thankfully, technology helped in a very, very big way up until a point. And I managed to keep a lot of my teaching. I even managed to I was appointed as a director of a choir during COVID, which was, I found it very funny that during COVID they needed a conductor suddenly to work with them. And
You were the only one.
I think, yeah, it's kind of not a norm. But yes, it was actually very useful for me too, because I got into, because I was not a choral conductor till then, and I got to get the feeling of a choir even on Zoom, which was bizarre. But we worked on repertoire endlessly, and when we came out of that, we had lists of repertoire ready in music term, and then we had to just put it together. So it worked on our. We managed to find the positivity, the positive side of it.
I thought that the whole COVID thing was, I was doing like I was doing 7 Zoom rehearsals a week. It was like so much. And you learn how to do that. Like it was kind of a learning process for everybody.
It
Like,
was.
what can we do? What can't we do? What works? What doesn't work? Did you find that was a period for you as well?
Oh yes, there was the first couple of months. I was so ignorant of how things don't work, and I was sitting on the piano and starting playing and accompanying the choir, and then it didn't work. And there were people saying that I couldn't hear that. There was a delay. That can we try it again? And I was trying all the different technological. I was going into YouTube and trying to find what is the best equipment you need and all of that. And then there was a dead end. So you had to change the perspective. You had to change the way you work. And I think this kind of helps you, because I hope we never have to do that again, but it has trained us to be more adaptable, more flexible, and we might use it in the future in different terms.
Well, I found that there are some really valid things to do. Like I will often, just meet with my soloists and just discuss tempi like over Zoom to start with before we get together. I have a large festival and we have like 150 singers, and we do a big festival where we have like 1,000 singers who come in. So I start my rehearsals and do them all on Zoom as well as doing them live. So people who live far away can practice and get the tempi before they. I just found there are applications of things that I
Yes,
did. And
exactly.
I'm fascinated by the way technology can aid us in some of these.
Plus, it has made suddenly the. I mean, it's funny because we weren't allowed to travel, but at the same time, we have been closer than ever with people and places that we weren't talking or communicating. So, for instance, we met online, And we met via the Atelier d'Excellence, which was something that started
Shout
online.
out to Maria Zoe and to Sonny Boy Dladla.
Exactly, because this is something that would possibly not happen in under normal conditions. So I have to be grateful that I met those people and that we've been working and we've been doing all those conversations, those interviews, and those coachings, because it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So if you get the positive thing out of it, I think you can at least put a smile and move on.
I mean, there's always that you have to always look for the positive in everything. I always say that even when you do poorly in a performance, it's a great chance to learn, or you don't get that audition because maybe you weren't ready, there was something missing. I always find the positive in those things too, and while I didn't always love doing Zoom rehearsals at the end. Like the most important thing, the reason I'm here is to keep my community together and get people singing through a hard time, and I was able to do that. So that was really a rewarding experience. And then when we got back together again, because we were intact, it was really a valuable thing. So it's amazing what we can do when we have to be creative.
Yes, and everyone was so eager to go back as well. So you had a boost of enjoyment in what we did. It was never a dull experience because suddenly what we were working all of that time, all those months, you suddenly could do it together. You could listen to each other, and now you would listen differently. What I was doing with the choir was now that you are allowed to listen to each other because Zoom rehearsals were done on mute. So now take advantage.
Every time someone forgot to mute, you figured out why you have to mute. It's like it turns into a cacophony of chaos and
Exactly.
Please mute your screen.
But now you appreciate it more because now you have people around you and you understand that you're just a part of this group, and it's different. It's a different mentality.
During the middle of COVID, one of my choirs went full remote, and one was a little more adventurous, and actually we rehearsed in people's backyards from September until like a cold mid-November. It got really cold, and we're out there in someone's backyard freezing. But we got to rehearse in person, and that was such a special thing. And just to get to sing, it reminded us that the breathing together, forming a vowel together. I mean, you couldn't do that for so long, so it really makes a difference.
You cherish the moment. Yes, it's very, very true.
And I always remind people that that a lot of the greatest musicians that we celebrate so much, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, they all had choirs. They all wrote music for choirs, and they also, a lot of them taught. They were teachers.
Yes, and in a way, I think this was my first experience as a conductor, and then. And I apply that in the choral conducting as well, of course. You're actually, in a way, a teacher, not necessarily in technical terms, because I find that the role has changed completely to what conductors used to be in the 50s or the 60s. The musicians are often better musicians, better at their instrument than we would ever be. So you have to show something different to them. You can't tell them what to do. You can tell them how you would like it to sound, so they know how to do it in a way. There's a different communication, I feel, with the singers and with the musicians in an orchestra. So I find that this is the link to teaching as well, because you have to inspire, you have to make them understand your ideas. And then tell them what you want to hear and how you want to hear it, and then they have to find a way to do it. So it's teaching on a podium. I think that this is what I find the role to be.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about the changing roles. And I always teach my undergraduates that nothing's stuck in time. We think of classical music as been the same since then, but just listen to recordings from different decades of a Mozart concerto, and you know it's always changing, and we always put some of ourselves into the music. So society is changing. There's constant evolution. So things are going to change in the music making, just like it changes in society.
This is very important what you say about society changing and eras change. And I think that another thing that we often miss is when we're examining those composers, we think of them as people who lived in a room and composed only, but they were people that were living outside the society. They brought the problems in their music. They brought the happiness in their music. They brought their lives in the music, and they were part of that society. So if you really want to examine Mozart, let's say, you'll have to go to the time and see what was happening where he was living when he went to Paris. Oh, it was a different time, and what time and what kind of years they were, and when he was traveling in Germany, and then you can understand why his music is the way it is, and why.
With Mozart especially, man, reading his letters is so much interest. It's so enlightening because to see what he thought, to see what he wrote to his sister, their kind of special relationship. I couldn't approach their pieces without digging into a little bit of their. I tell my students it's like amber that captures everything going on in society, and I'm like, that Jurassic Park movie with the fly and amber, and they forget that. But it's the same with music. Everything gets captured in the amber of the music, and we have to make that come alive. But you have to know the society that created it, though.
Yes, it's very, very important. And I also always go around the Kirche, when you're working on let's say a concerto, piano concerto. I wanted to see what other works was he composing at the same time, especially, I mean, Mozart, who was so busy. He was rarely composing only one thing. So you see, oh, this happens in the quartet as well, and he wrote an aria, concert aria, and has a similar harmonic sequence here. So it might mean that we have to do that, and you get a fuller, image, a better picture of what he was doing at that time.
I love this kind of the part of the conductor I love is is like studying and digging into these people and reading the books and kind of coming up with the opinions that it takes to have a good interpretation. I find that that's one of the things I love is like that keeps growing with you, and it never gets boring, it never gets old. Every time I pick up a work of the masters, it's always like, okay, back to studying again. And I always tell people most of what a conductor does is like the iceberg. Just the top is the performance, all the bottom is the 2:00 in the morning. I'm studying scores, or I'm doing budgets, or I'm preparing budgets to present to a board. There's just so much other parts to it, but it's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We have our first question from the audience, and Peter asks, who are some of your inspirations, your role models as a pianist and as a conductor?
So naturally, I will go with my two teachers because I was studying for years next to them. Dora Bakopoulou was my piano tutor, and I have really learned so many things, especially about romantic music. She's such an amazing performer of Chopin's work, and I think that if someone can say that I've learned how to use rubato, I have. If I could say that, I would do that because of her. So in a way, it's she's the one who really inspired me. And she showed me that the music is in our lives, and how we can use our experiences in our music, in the music that we perform. I remember it was so nice what I was preparing my final exams for my diploma, and I was playing on a Saturday, I think, and on Wednesday we had our last lesson before that, and she said, and I asked, what should I do tomorrow and Friday? And she said, tomorrow, just go at the sea, like swim all day. Don't get under the sun. Just find a shade, relax. You are ready. You need your life, your calmness from that day to be part of your performance. And it's not just.
What great advice! What great advice for everyone to.
It's great. It is useful because you can't. You have to use your experiences in your playing.
Because it is a reflection of our humanity. Ultimately, yes, we have to be technically prepared and well studied, but then there's the part that we have to be, be able to make joy and find joy in the music, not just, it's not all that. Finding ways to release the stress of what we do is very important.
And I think that creates the personality as well, because if you don't have experiences to show, then you possibly are not that different than others. So in a way, your experiences make you unique. And at that stage that we are now, naturally we've heard the best pianists in the world, and we have heard probably the best recordings that have been made already. We're not aiming to be better. We're aiming to do something different, something personal. So for someone who wants to listen to a recital, he's not going to listen to Liszt Sonata being performed in the best way ever, but Liszt Sonata being performed by that specific pianist. So
Yep. And once, every generation there's new pianists that come and they add themselves to it, and you listen to the interpretations and how different they can be. It is stunning.
And it shows how those works are above any, because they can be projected in different ways, and that's why you get inspired. I remember as a young pianist, I would listen to the sonata, the Opus 111, Beethoven, from Richter, from Michelangelo, from anyone I could find, just so I get ideas. And there were different ideas that I would adopt and I would try to personalize. So yes, it has to be personal. I think this is one of the advices I give to my students. It has to be you that is performing.
Good advice indeed is to find that, what is, that your voice to this. And I find as a conductor, it takes a long time to find your voice. We start by, as an assistant conductor, watching the greats, and then kind of, when I made the transition from being a singer to being a conductor, I would take notes about what worked, what didn't work. I learned just as much from what it didn't work as I did from watching what did work, and then you find your own voice and your own gestural vocabulary.
Yes, yes, and to finish with that question, because of my conducting teacher, Luculescu. I remember one of the important things was that when you're starting, and as you said, you don't have an orchestra, so you don't have an instrument, and that is the biggest challenge I had as a new conductor. And he said that even if you don't have, if you have a clear idea of what you want to do, this will really show when you're lucky enough to have people in front of you to play the music that you have in mind. So the preparation that you do and what you really want to do, you have to be really clear and really adamant with yourself and know what you're asking. So this was another of the important lessons I got from him.
What are some of the, being that you're in London, how are the state of COVID now? Have things opened up fully? Are we still seeing concerns, and how are things these days?
No, I think that we are in a way ignoring the problem, or hiding it, under the carpet. It is getting better, to be honest. It has been much better, but some people might be a bit more afraid that it's lurking. It might show up again, but I think we're trying to act like it's solved. So things are starting to work again, and it has been different. I've seen from colleagues in Greece and how things work there. We have been less cautious here in England, I find.
Interesting.
So the orchestra play without masks most of the time, without face masks. So it's and in the opera I was working in a production, and we were testing regularly. So this has changed in our lives, obviously, but this does not affect your work. So in a way, it's not that it has changed musically, but when you're playing with face masks and conducting with a face mask, I mean, this was the first thing that was a relief when they told that, okay, conductors can take face masks off, because you miss that communication.
So much of my conducting is in my face and is in my gesture. And I always tell when I'm working with my choirs, please match my vowel.
Yes.
Oops, I can't see my face.
How do you do that?
You can't see my face. Yeah, so it's like, imagine that my vowel is the I always joke around, singing a pure ah vowel takes, and with a choir, they're not in tune unless all the overtone series lines up and their vowels are matched and unified. So I'm always working that, but they're all wearing masks. I can't see them. I can hear them, and it's like, yeah, that's not ideal, but we do what we can these days, right?
Yes, yes, yes. But I think that we're getting there. I want to stay optimistic, but I think that now this turn was the bad one, and we're now going out of the tunnel and into. I feel that this summer is going to be close to normal.
I always ask my Greek friends and colleagues, I'm like, is it unfortunate that we use Greek letters in the alphabet to describe these variants? And how many Greek letters are there?
We've got more, so let's just say that this is the last. Let's just stop there.
Got to find a different way of nomenclature for my Greek friends. Quite another question from the audience. What inspires you the most when you conduct? Do you see images, or do you think of places like Greece, somewhere else? So do you have a visual representation when you're making music?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't think I visualize a lot. I don't think that's my skill. It's more of sounds that I think I'm more of a listening person. So it might be something that I have imagined in my mind as a sound that I'm trying to get. I tried to do stories at some point, and it did help in romantic music. Naturally, it is easier. You can easily create a story and make those characters. But I think that from the moment I was drawn into the opera, I think that stage possibly was the like characters, and this was what, but not as an image, but as a reality, like a story. So I think I go back to the story. I think that's what drives the imagination.
A lot of the advances in the musical world were pioneered by opera, by composers trying to represent what they were visually seeing with the music. For example, if you go back to Combattimenti di Tancredi and Clorinda in Monteverdi, he wanted to do punches, that they were punching each other. So pizzicato comes out of that punching. I just find that so fascinating that it's like a lot of, whenever they're trying to create something visual, they'll make that come to life in the music, and that's often that we just say, this sounds great, and everyone just kind of takes it.
It's sound effects actually. They're using that which we have later on in the movies, and they're actually using the instruments to highlight this. Since we're talking about images, and there was a project I was doing back in the Royal Academy when I was studying, and it was the music that was using colors or images, and I was doing the Etude Tableau, the Rachmaninoff, and I had a project of the Isle of the Dead, the Rachmaninoff symphonic poem, and putting images into like creating a story, and if I had found someone from animation or something, it would have been much better to make it as a film. But yeah, there is much connection to image and sound, and it's the kinesthesia as well.
I was just going to bring up kinesthesia and the challenges, and some people, we certainly have famous musicians who are kinesthesia people. Who are some of them? It'll come to be. There were certainly several of them that saw colors when they played. A certain chords had colors and shades and hues, and I was fascinated by that.
The timbre, the trumpet has a red color, and there are specific sounds that translate into colors. Yeah, it's
wasn't Scriabin? He had. I think he
did. Yes, but I'm not really sure, so I don't quote me on that.
I remember from somewhere because I saw a symposium on that. It's fascinating to be like how people's brains work. I mean, we had I had a really acclaimed violinist who, doctorate from Juilliard and the whole 9 yards, very, very accomplished. And she is now going back and getting her degree in neuroscience and talking about the brain and the way the brain works. And we had these conversations on musical aesthetics, and it's just fascinating to me how complicated the brain is and how the different parts of music affect different parts of the brain left and right.
Yes, if you go that deep, it's kind of like an ocean to swim in, but it explains a lot of things. It explains those feelings that you get, why do you get them? What do they mean? Why do you have those pictures in your head when you hear that sound? It's kind of like sometimes smell or sound, they bring memories, or they and it's I think they work in this in a similar way.
It's a good point. A certain piece of music, the idea of a referential listener who hears like something. For me, it's like maybe something I heard when I was in high school, and it comes back to you as an adult, and it's like brings back those memories and those smells and those sounds. Yeah, it's fascinating. With Alzheimer's patients, people at the end who've forgotten so much, but a song some of us have forgotten how to speak, but they'll hear a certain song from their youth, and they can start singing along. The memories of the lyrics can be still there, and it's just incredible the way our brains are wired.
Or the singing might loosen the tongue. People that have issues with stutter, or like they can sing it, and they can this is phenomenal. How the music creates different procedures in the mind, and leaves all the problems aside, and then you just have a flow.
That's why we are always advocating for the music education in the schools here in America, and often when budgets get tight, one of the first things to be on the chopping block is the arts. And I'm like, well, that's one of the last things we should be cutting or thinking about, trimming, but that's always a fight we face.
And we felt that during COVID, that the arts were naturally the first to be out of the picture, but at the same time, it was what kept people sane. So they might.
Where would we be without Netflix and without Spotify and all of our streaming services and give us that art?
Books, music to listen to. It's part of even theaters online. You were starting watching like. It's essential. It's not essential in a way that you can't live without, maybe as medicine or as, but at the same time, mental health is equally important. So yes, I was really one of those who were really upset with how people were treating art, and at the same time they were using it excessively. So it's kind of you need to acknowledge the importance of every part in our lives, and art is equally important to anything else.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's absolutely true, and it's great to hear you say it. And where would we be without our artists and the people who enrich our lives in that way, and our teachers, and people like yourself who are out there in the trenches making music and helping inspire young minds. I mean, it's been great to meet you and talk to you on the show.
I'm very glad I'm here. It's all of those matters that really we talk about them every day, but when you get to kind of talk to them with a colleague, and we share that, it gets more clear in your head what you really feel and what you want to say. I've been talking to my daughter recently about art and how we need it in our lives, and it was quite fresh now it makes more sense every day. It makes much more sense.
Well, we've all become philosophers during the COVID period because we've had so much more time to think without the traveling and the hustle and bustle, and with all that quiet time is really important. And I found that it's manifested itself a lot as things have come back in quite a big way, and the plans, and what is something you learned about yourself during that period?
That I can always find motivation even when there is no motivation around, and it was something that I felt that I was not good at, that I felt that I would only work hard when I had a goal to, and when I had a concert, that's when I would kind of know that I have to work. But at the same time, because of COVID, there was nothing to aim for. And
it was really hard to find motivation for a lot of us during that period, and to keep ourselves. If I know that I have a stack of music that has to be learned by X time, I'll be ready. But exactly. In the abstract, it's much harder for me to study.
And yes, it was something that I tried. I haven't succeeded 100%, but I have tried to make myself think of, okay, I will work even if I don't have a deadline. And it's a hard thing to do if you're not natural on it. But yes, I think that this is one of the things I've learned.
Where can people go to find out more about you and to see your work?
So, yes, one of the COVID issues was that it was in one negative moment of me. I just said that I'm just gonna draw back and work on my own and not start posting. I wasn't very keen on social media and online things. So this is one of the things I haven't learned, but I should now learn to be more extrovert on what I've done and what I need to do. So the social media is something that I need to work on. And for instance, I don't have an Instagram page. I don't have a Facebook page that I work on. All of those things are not my thing. But my website will be back and running. So my LinkedIn was the one that kept me going. So LinkedIn is the one to follow projects. I'm having a festival. I'm chorus master in the Opera de Bourget festival, which is great. We're doing Traviata. We're doing Faust. We're doing Lehar. So yeah, it's a great
Ooh,
it's
it's
a
a
great
nice
thing
mix
to
of music.
get. Yes, mix as you said. So yeah, this is the project I'm more interested now in, like focused on, and at the same time, I want to really work on my choir, and we're doing really great work. But the Wolf songs, which is very challenging, series, and the Fanny Hensel, and we're back into concert mode finally. So we're after the Zoom. We had a first concert in December, and now we're back. And in the end of March, we're doing a concert again here in London. And I also I'm very pleased to be directing the Shrek musical in my daughter's school, because
Wow.
it's really fantastic how those kids are so full of talent, and they get with a professional orchestra. We are actually helping them experience how a show is made. I've been with them from the beginning of the season, and we've been running rehearsals like if it was a professional production. So I find that if they get this from that age, because they're from middle school up until high school, they really get those experiences that are so useful in the future, and they might get more attracted to what we're doing.
How
Uh,
do they like the musical theater?
so how do I like it?
Yeah, I mean, I find that that's the introduction to almost all of my American colleagues who are opera singers. Their first introduction is most likely going to be musical theater because that
It
comes from
is.
our American
It
soil.
is. It is. Yes, I often found I'm new to it, to be honest, and I find now that I'm getting into it, I find that there are composers of. I mean, I find that Shostakovich has moments of musical theater within his symphonies as well. It's kind of crazy how these can be linked, and the singing is way different, obviously, but we're talking about the same work, but in a different genre. So uh, you can really match. You can really match those things together.
Well, it is unique, and boy, when kids get into it, it's exciting. It's fun to perform. It's a kind of that gateway for a lot of Americans to get exposed to the stage, and then they just stick with it. And then they might find they have a beautiful voice, and a teacher draws them towards opera. And that's the story of a lot of American singers. And it's interesting to hear that you're doing. I just saw Shrek the musical, and it's a fun
Yeah,
show.
it's great. It's so much fun. I really like. I mean, this is what I like with opera and musical theater. It's the whole experience, the full on, like the backstage, the orchestra, the singers. I mean, even my wife works in in West End, so I know that the backstage, all of that. She works in the costume and wigs department. So everything matters, and you get the children to experience that.
It
Uh,
is magic. The energy of the stage hands and the technical crew and all of it. That's what makes it special. And back to the days of the founding of opera, it was this combination of all the elements put together into this super art form, and it
yeah,
just continues to unite us.
It is magic. I see my daughter getting on stage when we rehearse, and she feels like she's in a different world. And yeah, we shouldn't underestimate that. It's really a magical moment. So we need to experience that, and we need to encourage children to get to experience that.
Well, Giannis, thank you so much for joining me on Music Matters today, and I look forward to meeting you in person one of these days, either side of the pond.
Yes, I don't mind any what would work. But yes, I thank you very much for having me. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Continued success, and I look forward to seeing your work down the road.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe and smash that bell icon on YouTube for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. Thank you so much for joining us today, and remember, keep music alive.